thought this was a good time to take a look back at the last couple of consoles. And I've kind of been collecting games for the last decade or so. Not really on purpose, more, I don't know, as I gained more financial stability, I just sold less games, traded less games. So yeah, I've got like a binder full of PS3, Xbox, PS4, stuff like that. So I just want to, casually just kind of flick through it. And, I don't have the most extensive collection by any means, but I thought this would be a cool way to just go back and to talk about some of the games that I played from the last decade in gaming. And, I want to hear about the games that you've played as well. So let me know in the comments and we can get some discussion started. But yeah, here we go. First up, we got Portal 2 for the PS3. And this was a really, really cool game. I loved the first Portal, having played it as part of the Orange Box, a great value compilation that Valve put out. And for console-based gamers like myself, it was a great opportunity to actually get a taste of some of Valve's stuff, because I'd missed out on Half-Life 1 and 2, not being a PC-based gamer. So, I really got to enjoy Half-Life 2 for the first time playing the Orange Box, and, that was a really cool game. And that same compilation also came with Team Fortress 2 and the Half-Life expansions, the Episode 1 and 2 for Half-Life 2. So that was really cool. But it also came bundled with the original Portal, a groundbreaking first-person puzzle-solving game, totally mind-bending physics, and just very, very creepy. Great atmosphere, great writing, and a lot of the same can be said about the sequel, Portal 2. It's a bigger budget version of Portal 1. It's almost a remake, a spiritual remake. They're taking the original ideas that made Portal 1 a great little experiment, and they're turning it into a big budget, full-blown release, a AAA Portal game. And it's really, really great. I also love Portal 2. The extra polish really goes a long way in making the atmosphere even more oppressive and isolated. However, I should note that the tone of Portal 2 is more overtly comedic than Portal 1. Obviously, the Portal series has a very wry, dark sense of humor. But with the addition of new characters like Wheatley, voiced by Stephen Merchant, a British comedian and the writing partner of Ricky Gervais, there's a lot more jokes in Portal 2, and sometimes this comes at the expense of immersion a little bit, but generally, even the silly moments are well written and enjoyable. And Portal 2 is a great game, so highly recommended. Next up, we have the HD re-release of two classic games, ICO and Shadow of the Colossus, a pair of games that some consider masterpieces by the incredibly talented Fumito Ueda. And these are a pair of games that really reflect their creator. Ueda is a guy that's known to assist in the actual animations and programming of the games that he's creating. I mean, not only is he directing the games, but he's also, even in the case of ICO, he even did the cover art for it. So if you want to play a game by a true auteur with a singular vision, then these are some awesome games that you might want to check out, because they both have so much character and an immediately recognizable style. Which brings us to one of my copies of Dark Souls 2. I own Dark Souls 2 for the Xbox and the PS3, and I also have the HD re-release Scholar of the First Sin. Why do I own so many copies of the same game, you ask? Well, at release, Dark Souls 2 ran incredibly badly on PS3. And I mean, this is a series that is not known for its performance, especially on consoles. We all remember Blighttown, the frame rate purgatory that was Blighttown. But having been so hyped up for the release of Dark Souls 2, I needed to play a stable version, lest I ruin my first experience with the game. So I actually ended up buying a secondhand Xbox just to play Dark Souls 2 with a decent frame rate. And the Xbox version is way, way better than the PS3, or at least from what I experienced playing the game at launch. The Xbox version trounced the PS3. And this seems to be the case with a lot of the multi-platform releases, the third-party releases I played for the PS3. And I've heard this could be due to the PlayStation 3's cell processor architecture, which I've heard is very difficult to program for. A lot of devs have just said it's an absolute nightmare, and that could be why we often find that the PS3 version of a third-party game or a PC port will ship with really, really bad performance issues. Dark Souls 2 being a good example of this. Yeah, in terms of the actual game, I don't hate it. A lot of people hate Dark Souls 2, and I think as a sequel to Dark Souls 1, which was just such an exceptionally good game, it's a little underwhelming, especially when compared directly to Dark Souls 1. But as a Dark Souls-style action game, it's absolutely bursting with content. It's a very long game, it has the most items I think I've ever seen in one of these games, and the Scholar of the First Sin HD release, which I also have, is definitely the definitive version to play, not only because of the added content and the rejigged enemy positions and adjusted difficulty, but also the silky smooth 60 frames per second, which I gotta say, what a treat to play that on PS4 with the silky 60 frames. Beautiful. I wouldn't recommend Dark Souls 2 as the first Souls game to play, but for fans of the other games in the series, it's definitely worth checking out. Okay, next up we have another compilation, the Metal Gear Solid Legacy Collection, 1987 to 2012. So this is a lot of Metal Gear games, including the 2D MSX classics, which I've actually yet to play, but they come as part of the bonus content. So this is literally every single Metal Gear game released up to 2012. And you know, it's rad, it's Metal Gear. I mean, I love Metal Gear. I've been a fan of Metal Gear since Metal Gear Solid. And picking up the Legacy Collection was a great way for me to revisit some of these games, and in HD, as is the case with Metal Gear 2 and 3. And this series is legendary at this point, created by Hideo Kojima, one of the great video game designers of our times. And, you know, I found the Metal Gear series to be somewhat hit and miss, but when he nails it, he really, really nails it. And Kojima has made some fantastic Metal Gear games. And playing those games up-resed and nice and smooth, that was an awesome experience. Metal Gear 3 especially benefits from getting a nice remaster. And this is the subsistence version of Metal Gear 3 with the improved camera. So it is the definitive version of the game at this point. So yeah, great compilation. Okay, next up, we got Borderlands. And this is a game that, when it came out, I was reading the reviews and I was like, wow, this sounds rad, like combining a Diablo loot system, which I was talking about recently with the Neo beta demo. You know, a Diablo loot system integrated into a first-person shooter perspective. Now, that is an original idea. But for some reason, I couldn't quite get into Borderlands, and maybe it's because I'm not crazy about first-person shooters, maybe the tone of the story didn't quite resonate with me, I'm not really sure. But, you know, it's a popular game and the series is huge, so I just didn't get this one. Next up, we got Mortal Kombat, the Complete Edition, Mortal Kombat 9. I've been a fan of Mortal Kombat since I was a kid. I first played Mortal Kombat 2 for the SNES at my neighbor's house, and yeah, I mean, what kid doesn't love the ultra-violence of Mortal Kombat? Mortal Kombat 9 was a particularly awesome release because it was the game that went back to the roots. You know, it was the first 3D game, anyway, to go back to the roots and the core gameplay that made Mortal Kombat a classic. And, you know, this just shows how NetherRealm Studios, you know, Ed Boon and those guys, it just shows how they really understand what the fans want. You got a story mode that's extremely meaty for a beat-em-up game, and it's basically just pure fan service, and it's fantastic, you know. You have almost every character that you remember from the original games, plus retro costumes and the original fatalities, but reimagined in fully 3D and extremely gory. It's just great fun. Great, great fun. And this brings us to Dark Souls, a game that I was discussing in my previous video about Neo and Souls-likes and kind of the imitators that have followed in Dark Souls' footsteps. But yeah, here's the original game, and this is the first game that I played in the series. And my first playthrough will always stay with me, I think, because going into a Dark Souls game for the first time with none of that muscle memory, and zero idea of what you're supposed to do is truly a magical experience, and I would love to be able to experience that again, but unfortunately, you only get one first time. So, I'm gonna probably talk about Dark Souls in more detail in some separate videos, but for now I'll just say, an absolutely fantastic, modern, 3D Metroidvania almost. And anyone that hasn't played this game yet, you really should try and get into it. Give it some patience, because these games are some of my favorites in recent years. But yeah, moving on. I have the PS3 version of Diablo III here, and it's a first for me. It's the first Diablo game I've played, and so far the only Diablo game I've played. I'd love to go back and revisit the earlier ones at some point, because I really enjoyed Diablo III. It was an insane amount of fun. And the couch co-op available for the console version is great. You know, you can just be hanging out, people can jump in, jump out, and, you know, you have that incredibly addictive Diablo loot system. So yeah, like great couch co-op game. Okay, and here's LittleBigPlanet, a PS3 exclusive. I don't even know really why. Oh, wait. This belonged to my sister when she had her PS3, and I've kind of just inherited it, and I did play a little bit of it, and very interesting, very quaint, twee game about sticking stickers on things and platforming. You know, not my usual jam, but pretty cool. Stephen Fry doing the narration in the intro, very charming. And yeah, this is a nice, casual, easygoing game. A good choice for younger gamers, for sure. Which brings us to Uncharted 2, the sophomore release from Naughty Dog in their Uncharted series, and this is the one that really put the Uncharted series on the map. I played Uncharted 1, Drake's Fortune, and you know, that's a pretty cool third-person, you know, cover shooter. But Uncharted 2 really pushed the cinematic element to the next level. I mean, it just has some incredible set pieces, and I think everybody remembers the set pieces from Uncharted 2, you know? The village sequence, very calm, very restrained, and then you get the action as well. Definitely a great AAA blockbuster type of game. Not my favorite franchise, but I do enjoy the Indiana Jones / Tomb Raider style vibe. It's very lighthearted and it's very fun. I have yet to play Uncharted 4, so I think when the time comes, I'll revisit the other ones too. There's an HD collection available now, the Nathan Drake collection, where you can actually play HD versions of these PS3 games. So yeah, I'll definitely pick that up at some point. Next up, we have Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine. Now, this one was kind of like an underrated gem, I think, because being someone that lives in the UK and being of a specific age, I have been aware of the Warhammer 40k universe for quite a while, and I did collect and paint a couple of models. So yeah, that's a whole other deal, right? But if anything can be said about the Warhammer 40,000 phenomenon, it's that it has some incredible lore. It's extensive, it's dark, it's disturbing, and it's friggin' awesome. And there's a couple of channels I could recommend. If you really want to get into it, Lutin has some incredible lore videos which can get you started. I mean, seriously, they're amazing. Check them out. But yeah, Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine. This is a game based on the world of Warhammer 40,000. And in the game, you take control of a Space Marine, the Adeptus Astartes, the ultimate killing machines of this universe. And it's just awesome. Like, you're just hacking through orcs with chain swords, blood guts everywhere. It's a right rompin' stompin' time. Especially for those familiar with the Warhammer 40k universe already. It's probably one of the best games set in that universe. If you want to get real, it's a fairly run-of-the-mill third-person shooter, but by and large, it achieves what it sets out to do, you know, put you in control of a Space Marine and let you tear shit up, basically. So, for someone looking for a very specific type of Warhammer 40k themed power fantasy, this is a good one to check out. Next up, I have Dishonored for the PS3, and this is a pretty cool game. I really like the implementation of stealth in Dishonored. For a first-person game, it's very, very smooth, and it works well. Because in the past, I have found it trickier to sneak around in the first-person perspective. Sometimes keeping an eye on the map and keeping yourself oriented is tricky. And the kind of steampunky setting was also pretty cool. Great voice cast, too. I remember Michael Madsen being in there, probably phoning it in, but it's cool to have Michael Madsen in a game, so yeah. Not the longest experience, but I thoroughly enjoyed Dishonored, and I'd recommend it if you can get it on sale, definitely. Okay, moving on. We have the PS3 release of Heavy Rain, a game by self-proclaimed auteur David Cage. And I don't mind David Cage's games. I've played quite a few of them now. I started with Fahrenheit, and I thought the first quarter of Fahrenheit was pretty cool, but I think Cage really likes to indulge himself with the scripts for his games, and all sense of cohesion or realism just goes straight out the window towards the latter half of the game, and I'm talking about Fahrenheit here. But the same can be said about Heavy Rain. It's actually, I'd say, more like 3/4 of a really great game. That just kind of, he just doesn't quite pull it off. Like, it's so close. He almost pulls it off. The fact that it's a noir detective story at its heart, it's a murder story, it's a thriller, this is one of the game's strengths. And tonally, Heavy Rain takes a lot of cues from some classic crime thrillers, like David Fincher's Seven or Silence of the Lambs, specifically Silence of the Lambs, because the soundtrack of Heavy Rain goes for a very classical but intense orchestral score, and it's very similar to Howard Shore's score for Silence of the Lambs, one of my favorite film scores ever. So I was really picking up that very high drama, very emotionally intense score, and it goes perfectly with a story like this. And it's a really cool game, and I'd recommend it definitely. Keeping in mind that this is still a David Cage game, and there are numerous plot holes and a lot of nonsense. But that brings us to our next game, which is actually Beyond Two Souls, David Cage's follow-up to Heavy Rain. And this one, it just didn't click for me at all. I thought the story was completely hokey, and it was more of a supernatural thriller. But, you know, supernatural thrillers are pretty silly anyway. It's kind of difficult to pull them off, really. I mean, it can be done, but Cage, you know, sorry, bro. I'd say give this one a miss. His next game, which is called Detroit Become Human, it's on my radar, and, you know, for all of the fun people make out of Cage, like, I still like to check out what he's doing, and even if I don't enjoy all his games, I certainly don't regret playing them. So yeah, Viva la Cage. Okay, next up is the absolute classic Red Dead Redemption for the PS3. It's still the same copy I had when I first played it. And this is actually my favorite Rockstar game ever. I think because of the Western setting, I think that for all the fun that we can have with these kind of modern urban settings that Rockstar can create, and they are amazing, all of them. But just having the Western themed game world and camping out at night in the Badlands and, you know, exploring and hunting and just living in this world. Wow, I mean, this is just such a great game. I love Westerns anyway, and, you know, a Western video game adaptation in this style is just fantastic. It's my favorite open world game, definitely. And I love the characters. I think John Marston is a fantastic character. He's, you know, he's an anti-hero, but he is very human as well. And I especially love the later stages of the game. I think it has some standout moments, you know, the Jose Gonzalez music coming in as you first enter Mexico. Fantastic moments, but some of the closing moments of Red Dead Redemption will stay with me forever. They were goosebump-inducing moments. I won't spoil it, but Red Dead Redemption, one of my favorite games ever. Okay, next up, I have a copy of Hidetaka Miyazaki's Demon's Souls, and this is the first entry in the Souls series, a series that is now quite popular. But back in 2009, the developer From Software were primarily known for their Armored Core series of mech RPG games, which I played a couple of those, and they're definitely an acquired taste as well. But with the release of Demon's Souls, it really seemed like a departure for From Software, and it marked Hidetaka Miyazaki's first real game of note. Although he did direct Armored Core 4 Answer, which I also played. Probably the best Armored Core game, so, Miyazaki, even from the start, seemed like a standout talent. And Demon's Souls really was quite a sleeper hit. It was a cult phenomenon, based mainly on internet word of mouth. Sony had absolutely no faith in the game whatsoever, and were very reluctant to release the game in the West. Sony chief Shuhei Yoshida, he absolutely hated the game after playing some of it during development. And this is reflected by the virtually non-existent marketing campaign the game received. But, now it's considered a classic, and I played it directly after playing Dark Souls. It just kind of slipped by me during its original release. I did hear about it, but the legends that you hear about the difficulty, that kind of intimidated me to a certain degree because, I don't consider myself amazing at video games. And when you hear about this game that apparently just completely kicks your ass, it didn't sound fun. But that's the thing with Souls. It just doesn't sound fun on paper, but you have to play it for it to actually click. And so yeah, I was late to the party with Demon's Souls, but I really enjoyed it. And it was very interesting to see how things had evolved or progressed, from playing Dark Souls. You play Demon's Souls, and it has less features, but it's still a very tightly designed game, and it has really awesome atmosphere. It's just such a fascinating prototype for Dark Souls, because the core gameplay that makes the Souls series so great, it's right there in Demon's Souls, and it's amazing how Miyazaki managed to get that right straight out of the gate. It also has that oppressive Souls atmosphere as well, which is fantastic. And, we're not dealing with undead in Demon's Souls. We're dealing with dredgelings and phantoms, and it's slightly different, but it's still really deep as well, and it's a great story. Any newer fans of the series that perhaps came in with Dark Souls 3 or maybe Bloodborne, don't forget about Demon's Souls. That's all I'm going to say. It might be kind of irritating to have to go back and find a PS3 to play it on, but it's a great little historical release at this point, and for fans of the Souls series, it's totally worth a look. I'd say it's essential. Okay, next up we have Batman Arkham City, and I played this after playing the original Arkham Asylum, which I thought was okay, but here's a game where my choice of platform affected my enjoyment, I think, because again, we see the PS3 version of Batman Arkham City running really, really bad. Really bad. And because it's like an open world game that has so much going on, the HUD is going crazy, it's just chaos from the moment you put it in. There's a lot of shit you have to be paying attention to, and that coupled with the atrocious frame rate, it was just a total buzzkill for me. So, yeah, this is another one where I might very well enjoy the remastered version, which is coming soon, I know that, because Arkham City reviewed very well, and I know a lot of people that thoroughly enjoyed the game, so I may pick up the remaster and give it another shot. Alright, let's move on to Ninokuni, Wrath of the White Witch, a Japanese RPG, and another PS3 exclusive. And this one's developed by Level 5, who are known for their Dark Cloud series, at least that's how I know them. And, this is a very charming RPG, and this is due to the amazing art direction. I mean, and this is a game that is co-produced by Studio Ghibli, so, this is like playing a Studio Ghibli movie. It's amazing, and they really, really nail that house style, the very bold lines, reminiscent of traditional anime, but still going for its own storybook vibe. Gameplay-wise, Ninokuni is a pretty odd duck. It's like a hybrid of Pokemon and some other traditional Japanese RPG. It's a bit of a weird one, and it took me a while to get into, but I'd say that the game is definitely worth checking out, especially for fans of Studio Ghibli, because they really nailed the look aesthetically. It's a beautiful game. It has a cel-shaded graphical style, and I've noticed a lot of these cel-shaded games are holding up really, really well upon re-examination. And yeah, Ninokuni is a great example of this. It's a triumph of great design over needless graphical detail. Okay, moving on, we have Katamari Forever. Okay, and this is more of just, it's so weird that I just wanted to own it. And I started playing Katamari with Katamari Damacy, so that was for the PS2, I think. And the most enjoyment I got out of that game was simply hanging out with a bunch of people and everyone passing around the controller and just going, what the fuck is this? And, that was awesome. So I thought, why not pick up Katamari Forever? And it's pretty much the same game. Once you've played a Katamari game from beginning to end, you kind of know what to expect, basically. And this game offers a pretty similar experience to the other Katamari games. If you're looking for something really weird, and maybe you want to take some drugs and play some games, this could be the one for you. Alright, next up we have Hitman Absolution. And I'll tell you right now, I'm a big fan of the Hitman series. I just love that core gameplay, and I've been playing since the PS2 version of Hitman 2, Silent Assassin. So I just really, really love Hitman, and this, for me, is the first Hitman game to disappoint. And I know a lot of people really like Absolution because of its more action-heavy emphasis in terms of gameplay, and also it's quite narrative-heavy as well. We have more of a focus on the overarching plot of Hitman, which is something that really was not the main draw for me. So yeah, I kind of consider this game like the black sheep of the franchise because it just feels completely out of whack with a lot of the other games. I mean, Blood Money was just a really, really great game. And from what I've played of these new ones, the Hitman 2016 digital series, IO Interactive really learned their lesson, reminiscent of some of the more well-regarded entries in the series. Not a huge fan of this weird digital episodic way of releasing the game. I would have much preferred for them to just wait until it was done and then release a complete experience. But even having said that, the first episode is really good. Like, it's such a huge sandbox of a level, the Paris level, that you can play it over and over again indefinitely and still have fun with it. But yeah, regarding Absolution, I'd say, as someone who's played a lot of the Hitman games and enjoys them, there are way better games in the series to check out. Absolution's more of a deep cut and is by no means a bad game, but simply not the best of the series in my opinion. Okay, next up we have Max Payne 3, the long-delayed sequel to Max Payne 2, The Fall of Max Payne. And I've been playing this series since the first one as well. I loved the original Max Payne. I played the PS2 port, and that was just a really refreshing game. The noir, pulpy, comic book style visuals were really cool. The story was super dark and full of really great performances by the voice actors. I really liked the way it broke the fourth wall occasionally, and it had a little postmodern edge reminiscent of some of Kojima's work, especially when Max Payne is referencing the fact he feels like he's being controlled by some unseen force. Like his will is not his own, and like he's referencing the player, obviously. So like the game's full of a lot of little moments like that, and it's memorable not just because of the gameplay. There's a lot of reasons why the first Max Payne is a great game. Max Payne 2, being a sequel, inevitably it feels a little less fresh than the first one, and the story is nowhere near as quirky or involving. And Max Payne 3 does suffer a little bit from this feeling of deja vu. However, I think that Max Payne 3 is a really solid game, and the gameplay really makes you feel like you're in a Tony Scott or John Woo movie or something. It's just intense gun battles, one after the other, with an amazing feeling of feedback. I mean, the guns feel powerful, and the physics are on point. This is Rockstar we're talking about here. This is not a Remedy-developed game, so this is more of Rockstar's interpretation of Max Payne, and they're really going for a kind of man-on-fire heat, modern crime thriller vibe, and it's really cool. This time you find yourself in Brazil, and Max Payne is now an older, broken man. He's an alcoholic. He is a complete wreck, basically, and you take control of Max at a point in his life where he doesn't give a shit whether he lives or dies. So that provides some context to the incredibly violent story, which has you gunning down hundreds of drug dealers and thugs in the favelas of Sao Paulo. And this is a violent game for sure, but sometimes I'm in the mood for a violent game, and just like sometimes I want to watch a ridiculous shoot-'em-up movie. So yeah, it may not have a lot of replay value, but I'll tell you, I had a blast with Max Payne 3 my first round through. And also, just wanted to mention the soundtrack is also fantastic by a band called Health, who I was already a fan of anyway, and I had no idea they were doing the soundtrack until I actually played the game, so that was another pleasant surprise. And I could definitely go for a remastered version of Max Payne 3 right about now. I don't know if there's any coming, but come on Rockstar, you've given us GTA 5, I could use Max Payne 3 as well. Next up we have Fallout 3. The footnote that this is the PS3 version of Fallout 3, and as a result, runs unbelievably badly, and has some game-breaking bugs associated with this particular version. But in spite of that, I still really liked Fallout 3 when I played it. And what more needs to be said about Fallout 3? I mean, it's one of the most popular games of its generation, and yeah, just that level of exploration, that's the key ingredient. That is the secret sauce for me. I will always enjoy Bethesda games because of the exploration, and there are a lot of things about Bethesda games I actually don't like that much, but, you know, I take them as they come, and I always enjoy playing Bethesda games, and I have done since I played Oblivion, so yeah, I feel like Bethesda have a lot of flawed masterpieces, and I am looking forward to the remaster of Skyrim. I played the original version for the Xbox 360, again because of the superior console experience. And although the game irritated the shit out of me a lot of the time, it was still a fantastic world to explore, and I really like that about games. I like games that allow you to explore, so Skyrim and Fallout 3 and all of Bethesda's games, wow, they are awesome sandboxes. Okay, next up we have Bioshock 2. And I remember playing the original Bioshock for the Xbox 360, and this game was a kind of spiritual successor to System Shock. Bioshock was Ken Levine's grand interactive commentary on objectivism and the philosophies of Ayn Rand. So pretty heady stuff, story-wise, and I'd say that the best thing about Bioshock is the setting and the story. I've read some Ayn Rand, and, you know, the plot of Bioshock is a very critical take on objectivism, pushed to the most dystopian degree. So yeah, clearly Ken Levine is not a fan of Ayn Rand philosophically, but he draws from a number of her works, especially Atlas Shrugged. And you can see this with the characters like Atlas and Andrew Ryan. These are very Randian characters, and even though they're actually villains, usually a Randian hero is a man unburdened by the concerns or expectations of society. He simply pursues his own interests, and as a result, elevates humanity. So in Bioshock, we see these themes inverted completely, and you have Andrew Ryan, you know, pursuing this perfect society under the water. You know, he founds the city of Rapture as this haven where society's best and brightest can thrive without the prying eyes or interference of the government. So Rapture was supposed to be this libertarian paradise, but, you know, when the game begins, it's completely fucked. And, yeah, I think that Bioshock is, in essence, a cautionary tale against the ills of objectivism, presented through a first-person shooter framework. And, you know, that's my one criticism of Bioshock and the Bioshock series in general. Like, why do they have to be first-person shooters? And, you know, I'm not gonna just whine because I don't like first-person shooters. I'm just saying, a game with this kind of narrative richness and creativity would almost certainly benefit from a heightened emphasis on the story as opposed to action. And I kind of wish it was like a point-and-click game or something, you know, like an old-school point-and-click, like, damn, because that world, the world of Bioshock, Rapture, one of the coolest game worlds ever. Incredibly iconic. Moving on, we have Armored Core 4 Answer, and this is a game I mentioned earlier, Hidetaka Miyazaki's directorial debut. And looking back, I remember really enjoying 4 Answer quite a bit, even after having played some of the other Armored Core games, Armored Core 3, Last Raven, a bunch of other ones. I mean, and these games have fundamentally the same core gameplay. They're very technical mech RPGs. They're almost simulators. I mean, you're building each mech from the ground up, using parts that are tied to weight. There's stats involved. It's insane. The amount of depth is truly staggering, and this is the thing that draws me to the Armored Core series. And underneath that RPG element, we also have an action shooter game, because, you know, when you actually play the main campaign, you are piloting the mech that you just built. So there's that level too. And Although the moment-to-moment gameplay is very, very janky and very weird, it takes a lot of getting used to and it never really becomes comfortable. It's the customization that really keeps me coming back. And I also picked up Armored Core 5, but really, For Answer was a much better game in my opinion. I think the campaign was just tighter, it was more memorable, and who can say how much of that was the Miyazaki touch, because despite predating Demon's Souls, this game is filled with Souls references, or I guess at this time they were King's Field references. And King's Field was a series that very heavily influenced Demon's Souls as well. But in Armored Core, we have references to the Moonlight Greatsword, we have the appearance of Patches, the long-running From Software mascot that has appeared in every Souls game so far. He's in Armored Core. So yeah, for Miyazaki completists, this is one to check out. For people who are looking for a fun game, this one demands much from the player. But if you're willing to invest the time, I think you'll have a lot of fun with it. Next up we have LA Noire from Team Bondi, published by Rockstar. A fairly experimental game, actually. It was the first game to use the very specific type of face capturing technique, which provides very accurate representations of what the actors are actually doing. I mean, they're scanning their performances completely. So this also ties into the gameplay, because you're playing as a 1940s detective in LA, and you have to interview people, interrogate criminals, you have to read their facial tics. And based on how well you do during these sections, that determines, the outcome of any specific episode that you're playing. The problem is, this system doesn't work very well. It really doesn't, because the actors' performances, you could be getting a really hammy performance and you could interpret that as lying, but actually it's just an actor acting weird with their eyes. They're just acting goofy. So there's an inherent problem with the system that often hinders your progress. It happens way, way too often. And that's a real shame, because I really like what they were going for, and a framework like this, the one that LA Noire uses, it could really work for modern adventure games. I love old school adventure games, and I'm very sad to have seen that genre die out in recent years. So games like LA Noire are always refreshing to me, even if they don't always hit the mark. And I think Heavy Rain and Beyond are other examples of modern adventure games. And on the flip side of LA Noire's gameplay, we also have the driving sections and the explorable city. And this, to me, feels like some kind of compromise with Rockstar. Like maybe the team were forced to implement a Rockstar engine and style. Because the open world sections of LA Noire really offer nothing of significance. The world is empty. There's only a couple of collectibles around. And having an open world serves no purpose whatsoever in LA Noire. It just becomes an inconvenience, especially when you can get your partner to drive you to every crime scene. And LA Noire did become infamous for having quite a troubled development cycle, and there are stories about working for Team Bondi, horror stories. So, given its troubled development, I'm not surprised that LA Noire ended up being a little bit disappointing, but it's got a lot of cool ideas, and if they did make a sequel, I would totally check it out. Next up we have Zone of the Enders HD Collection, which is a nice little compilation of Hideo Kojima curated games, Zone of the Enders and Zone of the Enders 2 Second Runner, both originally released for the PS2. And these games are primarily known for their connection to the Metal Gear series, simply because the original Zone of the Enders came with a pre-release demo of Metal Gear Solid 2, which at the time was one of the most hyped releases ever. So a lot of people bought Zone of the Enders just for that demo, including me. And I didn't really enjoy the first Zone of the Enders that much, but the sequel is a kick-ass game in its own right. If Armored Core is more of a mech simulator with its dry stats and clunky combat, then Zone of the Enders Second Runner is just the antidote to that. If you're looking for some fast-paced anime-style mech action, think Evangelion. This is the game for you. It's super fast-paced to the point of ridiculousness. There are so many visual effects happening all the time. It runs at a crisp 60 frames, even the PS2 version did. Love the visual style, love the anime cutscenes. Main characters voiced by Steve Bloom, which everyone obviously knows, the voice of Spike Spiegel from Cowboy Bebop. This is just a kick-ass game. I don't even want to spoil it too much. Just pick it up if you can. It's fantastic. Okay, so this video is now ridiculously long, but let me just do a couple more shout-outs from the binder. You know, we've got Deus Ex Human Revolution. That was a pretty cool Deus Ex game. Although, you know what? I preferred Invisible War. Holy shit, blasphemy. I have the special edition copy of Halo Reach, and I did say I wasn't a big first-person shooter guy, but the one exception that I always make is the Halo series. Although I have obviously fallen out of love with it over the years, I played the first Halo for the original Xbox, and I love that weighty Halo-style combat. And Reach wasn't really the best Halo game, but it is one of them that I actually got into quite heavily, albeit mainly for the online multiplayer. And I usually never go in for online multiplayer, but for some reason, Reach really gripped me, so yeah. And there are a lot of games I have the duplicate of because of the PS4 remastered version, so I will save some of those for the next episode, because today has been primarily focused around the Xbox and PS3 generation. But next episode, we'll be moving on to the games I have for PS4. I don't own an Xbox One, but there are so many multi-platform games these days, it really doesn't matter. I mean, and when I do inevitably upgrade to a gaming PC, I can check out some of those Xbox One exclusives that I've missed. But yeah, this will be my first two-parter, so stay tuned for coverage of some PS4 games next episode. But for now, I just want to say thanks a lot for listening, and please do let me know what some of your favorite games are from this 7th generation of consoles, and I will catch you next time.